Good morning. I'm going to go ahead and get started. As most of you know, my name is Scott Rostazer. I'm with Human Resources. Today we're going to talk about the Employee Assistance Program. Any questions that you have, please let us know. Raise your hand. We are taping today's presentation so people who can't be here can watch this. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and either of the Vanna Whites who are standing in today will be able to rush to you with a microphone. So today we're going to talk about the Employee Assistance Program. The Employee Assistance Program, you see two logos in the right-hand side here. They are ComPsych and Sun Life. At first, that's a little concerning. ComPsych is the name of the organization that is the EAP. Sun Life is our insurance that we use for life insurance, and this is embedded in our insurance. So when we pay for one, we get the other. So let me talk about ComPsych. ComPsych is the largest employee assistance program in the world. So anything that happens to human beings, they've probably heard of before. I want to talk for a minute about the history of employee assistance programs because it's important, because I'd like to dispel a myth about employee assistance programs. EAP started in the late 70s, early 80s. They started in workplaces by employees who were having drug and alcohol issues. They really just started as your basic AA in the workplace, support groups for people to talk about maintaining their sobriety. Now, why that's important is because a lot of people still have this idea in their head that, well, the EAP, that's where you go if you have a drug or alcohol problem. Granted, that's one of the services that they can offer. But what they offer now is quantum years away from what happened in the 80s. So for those of you who have that idea that the EAP really is, that's where people with drug and alcohol issues go, it's so much more than that, and I hope that I can answer that for you today. So let me go ahead and get started, and let me give you the best news first. This is absolutely stone cold free. There is no cost associated with you going to the EAP or calling them, nothing. No hidden costs, it's free. Free and Friday are good words today. So let me go ahead and get started. I said that ComPsych is the largest EAP. They are founded in 1984. They are a real pioneer in the EAP field. Leading provider of critical incident services worldwide. We have not had a lot of use for critical incidents. That's pretty much when something really unfortunate happens in a workplace, somebody passes away, or there was a fairly significant accident that's traumatic. This is an organization that can get a provider to us as soon as is possible to talk with employees about their reaction, their response to something that they've seen or that they heard. We've been very fortunate that we've not had to do a lot of these. I think we did one, unfortunately, towards the fall of last year. We had an employee pass away in a vehicle accident on the way to work. I called the EAP, and they were incredibly responsive in getting somebody to us as soon as possible. Hope that doesn't happen again. They are an integrated resource. They allow for confidential consultation on any personal issue. But let me go back to the whole issue of confidentiality. Because if I've known this about employee assistance programs, unless employees truly believe that it's confidential, they're not going to access it. Because one part of your brain is saying, well, wait a minute. The city of Wilmington is offering this. So the little voice in your head might say, so what do they find out? What do they get out of it? Well, what we get out of it is a nice benefit for all of our employees. Healthy people are more productive people. They stay with an organization longer. That's what the city gets out of it. What do they get out of it as far as information? We get a report every 6 months of how many people, and broadly defined what were the problems they sought services for, and that's it. No names, no social security numbers, no employee ID numbers, none of that. The confidentiality is ensured by law. How many of you watch Law and Order or TV shows like that? Okay, you know in Law and Order, there's that doctor-patient privilege, and the doctors are always real stick in the muds until the police threaten them about coming back with a subpoena. That's the law. They can't disclose any information to anybody without a subpoena or your written authorization, unless one of three exceptions are met. And the exceptions are very, very specific. And once I explain them to you, I hope you understand why they're there. The first exception is in reference to duty to warn. Corey, you should never sit up front. You know that? I'm going to pick on Corey for a minute. And Jonathan. It's perfect that you're sitting together. Corey and Jonathan work together. Now imagine for a minute that Jonathan goes to the EAP. Now I am making this up. Okay? Says, this guy Corey, he has been rubbing me the wrong way for how long, Jonathan? Years. He's been rubbing me the wrong way for years. You know, I'm just really fed up with this guy. I'm going to shoot him. Now, Corey, I'm not giving that idea. I'm guessing he's probably had that idea for quite some time. He just hasn't gone to the EAP with it. But if he says that to any medical provider, including the Employee Assistance Program, they have an ethical and legal duty to do what? Warn Corey. Consider yourself warned. No, kidding. But does that make sense? That's about safety. That's about safety of Corey. The second exception is if someone is talking about hurting themselves, and they are at imminent risk to do that. Imminent risk. It's an operative phrase here. That means if somebody doesn't do something, there's a high probability someone's going to get hurt. They may call 911. They may call someone's wife, husband, family member, and let them know that there is a dire emergency going on. Now, I want to come back to this imminent risk. If someone goes into the EAP and they're very depressed, and they say something like, you know, I sometimes wonder if it's really worth it anymore. That's not imminent risk. That's not even close to that. Imminent risk would be something like, you know, it's not worth it. When I go home, I have a lot of medication. I'm going to take all of this medication that I have. It's just not worth it anymore. That's imminent risk because they're talking about how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, and they got a plan. Legally, that person needs to do, that provider, be that an EAP provider, a dentist, or your family physician. They have a legal duty to do what? Do whatever they can do to make sure that person's okay. If that's call the police, call 911, which is what typically somebody would do. On the one hand, that's a violation of people's right to confidentiality, but it's specifically allowed for because it's about safety, your safety. The third exception, again, and this is the same for any medical provider. If someone is talking to any provider, mental health provider, EAP provider, and they're talking about current child abuse, current elder abuse, by both state and federal law, they have to report that. And in reporting that, they violate that person's confidentiality. Do you understand why they would do that? That's important. So, to summarize, unless you come in talking about killing somebody, and not just saying, man, this Corey guy, he just really makes me crazy. Let me just go on for an hour about Corey. Well, that's not a threat to Corey. But unless you come in with a specific plan to hurt somebody, or if you were to come in and say, I'm going to blow up city council chambers, that's specific enough they would have to do something. Unless you can do something like that, come in and talk about hurting yourself with a real imminent plan and access to the means of that plan, or there's any current abuse of children or the elderly, the EAP is confidential. Any questions about that confidentiality? Because that's really the foundation of an EAP. If people don't really understand that this is confidential by law, they're not going to go. Yeah. Thank you, Vanna.
I had a question. You were talking about abuse. You mentioned elderly and also you mentioned children.
Children.
Why not spousal abuse? You know, that's also, or
that's
say, you know, a partner or, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend. Why is that not also included?
That's an excellent question, and my answer is it's not satisfactory, but that's just the law. Now, if it got to the point where that person was at imminent risk of being killed, that's when they would have a duty to warn that person. But to your question, just going home and being physically abusive towards them, that's confidential. So who's eligible for the EAP? Every employee and anybody who lives with an employee, regardless of the nature of the relationship, flat out. If they're under your roof, they're under this coverage. And this is how confidential it is. Phil, you married. Imagine, if you will, Phil makes his wife crazy. Okay. It's so confidential, if Phil's wife were to call the EAP and come in, Phil would never know. So that's how confidential it is. Even if it's your benefit, you're the employee, if someone's coming in to talk about you, that's confidential. Your spouse won't even you won't even find out if your spouse or your children go. Now, if they're under the age of 18, they do need under the age of 16, they do need parental consent. So that's who it's eligible for. It's really simple. If somebody lives in your house with you, they're covered. Does that mean if you're lucky or unlucky enough to have your mother-in-law live with you, are they covered? If your boyfriend or girlfriend lives with you, are they covered? Are your children covered? The way this is written, it's 3 appointments per issue per year. And the year starts the first appointment. So if I was going to go into the Employee Assistance Program April 5th, I have 3 appointments that I can use free until the next April 5th. Now, if I were to need something more than that, most of the providers that they have take Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm saying most because I'm sure there are some exceptions. Just like with some of us, there are some exceptions that Blue Cross Blue Shield is not your carrier, you're with your spouse. So as much as possible, we try to dovetail coverage with the EAP with whom our insurance carrier is. So they provide confidential consultation on any issue you can think of, and I do mean any issue. They offer legal information and resources. I'll talk more about this, but you can call the EAP if you have a legal concern, and you get a free half-hour consultation. A free half-hour consultation about any legal issue except one. Anyone care to guess what that would be? Any employment law issue. Why? It's a conflict of interest for this EAP. All EAPs have that caveat because it's a built-in conflict of interest. If I were to come into the EAP and I want to consult about an employment issue, I am their client. Who is their customer? This is my employer. There's a conflict of interest. No matter what they do, they're not going to meet one of the needs of their client or their customer. That's no win for them, and that's why all EAPs stay away from that. They have information both online and live about any work-life need you have, from financial issues to babysitting, being a caretaker for a parent, anything you can think of. They have a lot of resources for it. I'll talk more about that as I go on. They have financial information. They also have an online information, and you can do a search for just about anything and find it. In the back of the room, there were little Wally cards. How many of you grabbed them? These are really handy because of what I call the fire extinguisher rule. They're really handy to have. So is a fire extinguisher. But we never really know where it is when we need a fire extinguisher. And a fire extinguisher doesn't fit well in your purse or your wallet. These cards do. So put it in your wallet, put it in your purse. When it gets to the point where Corey really is driving you crazy, that's when you can pull the card out. Because you're never sure when you're going to need it. And it's not just to talk with somebody about a personal issue. It might be a financial issue. It might be a legal issue. Or you might need a resource about caretakers in the area. Can they help with that? Absolutely. I've already talked about the confidentiality. They provide a summary to human resources. I get that. I get it twice a year, and it really is how many people. Broadly defined, why did they come in? And it kind of separates them between face-to-face contacts, online contacts, and telephonic. There's no information that I can look at in there that I would be able to point to any employee or any department and say, this department even access to EAP. I don't know. It's available 24 hours a day. Now let me clarify. What's available is telephonic counseling 24 hours a day in any of the online resources. I don't want people to think that I'm going in for some personal counseling. I don't want my wife to know, so I'd like to schedule an appointment at 11:30 at night. Unless you find a very exceptional provider, they're not working. They're not there. But what is 24 hours a day? If there's an emergency, a personal emergency, someone passes away in your family, or you had an argument with your child and they stormed out, you can call the Employee Assistance Program and just talk to somebody, free, confidential. That's unlimited. You can also look at their resources online. The web ID is EAP Business, and you can download all sorts of forums on topics that are almost too numerous for me to go over. Anything from finding a good babysitter, balancing work and family, good nutrition, budgeting, anything. Any questions before we go on? Are you just afraid of the people with the mics? It's short-term counseling. It's 3 appointments. It's 3 appointments because most people don't use more than 4. Most people, particularly in the EAP, if you access the services earlier, the sooner you resolve whatever difficulty is, the less the likelihood that that difficulty is really going to become large. So if it goes beyond the 3 appointments, they will work with you to see if they take your insurance. If not, they will find another provider that does take your insurance, or work it out some way with you for payment of services after that. If you seek services with the EAP and you need a higher level of care, I'll use myself as an example. Let's say that I drink 2 bottles of wild turkey a day. Seem excessive? Someone shrugged. It makes me wonder, what in the world would you consider excessive? And I don't mean the little airline bottles. Maybe that's what you were thinking. I was thinking the little airline bottles of wild. No, I'm talking the big ones. So if I were to seek assistance in the EAP, what they would do is do a quick assessment and recognize this person needs a much higher level of care than the EAP. In fact, it would be irresponsible and unprofessional to treat someone at that level. 2 bottles of wild turkey a day, I'm probably going to need to be in a facility because I'm in a detox. Seeing somebody face to face is a bad idea. So in that instance that they see someone who's going to need a higher level of care, they're going to make that referral sooner than later. And it's not to prevent you from using the EAP. They're just doing what's clinically appropriate. Make sense? You get 3 face-to-face visits per issue. Now that issue really is to the determination of your provider. For example, I mentioned that I drink 2 bottles of wild turkey a day. Well, my wife and I go into the EAP because we're not getting along well. What do you think the issue is? Yeah, I'm drinking 2 bottles of wild. It's hard to communicate with someone who drinks that much. So they're going to use those 3 sessions towards really what the core issue is. Does that mean my wife would be allowed 3 additional issues? Absolutely. If she wanted to come in and talk about what a nightmare it's like to live with someone like that, fine. 3 issues per problem, or 3 appointments per problem, 3 appointments per person. Any question about any of that? Yes? Okay, what they would do is, first of all, determine in the very first meeting, is this appropriate level for me to if I was the EAP provider, is this appropriate level for me to talk with this person? If I answer, yes, it is, this person would do fine in face-to-face counseling, they would use the 3. Beyond that 3, they would try and work and see if they took Blue Cross Blue Shield. Some of us have high deductible, so you would end up paying for that. And it's just like any other provider. They would use your insurance. That's when you go to your insurance. Most providers are on most insurance panels, but that pool is kind of, not to use a play on words, is kind of fluid. Sometimes providers will jump from one insurance company to another because they're haggling with Anthem over a bill that's unpaid. I don't want to see any Anthem people until I get paid. That happens. Other questions? That's per calendar year from your first appointment. So the calendar year isn't our calendar. It's, I go on April 1st, I have 365 days. Let me move on. The legal information and consultation, unlimited telephonic access about family law, wills, bankruptcy, estate planning, real estate, ID theft. I know someone who has used the Employee Assistance Program for ID theft. They have an ID theft kit they will send you, which is extremely helpful. It tells you who you need to contact, what do you need to do, how do you do this. The referrals that they make to EA providers are to local people. If you see an attorney, you get a free 30-minute consultation. If it goes beyond 30 minutes, you get 25% off. So let's say you're going through a divorce and you had used the EAP and contact your attorney, contact an attorney. You're going to get 25% off that bill through the EAP. Sound handy? Estate guidance. I've used this myself. It offers you the ease and simplicity of online. Just do the will. Yes, Phil?
Only one 30-minute consultation or 3 30-minute?
One. Good question. That's limited to one. Now, when it's telephonic, it's unlimited. You can call up about an issue, let's say that you're a landlord, an issue you're having with a tenant. Or you've been cited for having a barking dog. You can call and talk about that. Good question, though. Free online I've taken advantages, free online preparation of personalized and state-specific wills. This is really easy. You download the will, you fill it out, you have it notarized, you're done. Access to living wills, I believe, if my memory serves me right, are $10. You get them notarized and you're done. Now, how many of you have gone to an attorney for a will? How much does that cost? This is $10. Pardon me? You mean when you see the attorney?
Usually if you're going to go see an attorney, you're going to have something more than just a will prepared. You're going to have power of attorneys. You're going to have estate planning, everything else done at the same time.
I think that's true. I think there's some situations that are so complicated, that maybe just you filling out the will yourself is probably not your best idea. It's like if you have a very complicated tax situation, just filling out your taxes online might not be in your best interest either. Some issues are going to be complicated enough that you might need to see somebody. Any other questions about this? Are y'all really quiet, or does Chris terrify you with that microphone? It's Chris, okay. Financial information and consultation, you give them a call. It's unlimited. They can talk with you about budgeting, income tax, how do you restore credit. They can send you a kit about credit, issues around real estate, about how do you consolidate debt. Most EAPs use consumer counseling, CCC, And they will use them, and it's an organization, that's what they specialize in, helping people consolidate debt. They can help you with retirement planning. Again, all of this is confidential and objective. They're not selling you anything. That's why it's objective. Well, one of the reasons it's objective. They're there to provide you with a service. They're not going to benefit from sending you another package. They have things about work-life balance, child-elder care, options locally about education, event planning. The educational options can be things like, how do you find a good daycare provider? How would you screen a good preschool? What are you looking for in a school? All these are online resources for you. Home improvement, buying, selling a home, relocation. I'm not quite sure about assistance with shopping and locating items. I've not used that, but that would be helpful for me when I go to the grocery store and forget the list. I could just say, well, let me call the EAP. Although I doubt they have the list. They also provide support for expectants and new parents. They talk about emotional issues and concerns. They talk about financial issues that you'll have to look at, like managing expenses, saving for college, legal questions about wills, all the things that are listed here. Strategies and preparation for return to work. This is what their webpage looks like. The first thing you'll have to do is pick what language do you want to communicate with a website in. Now, at first, this seems a little inconvenient. And then you look at, this is the largest EAP in the world. Now, my experience with employers from the city of Wilmington were mostly monolingual. We speak a language. There are a lot of workplaces where that's not the case. They'd be able to use this EAP. I'm sure we have employees that English is not their native language, another language is what they would prefer to communicate in. That's all they need to do. So you come in, you log in, they'll ask you for what the ID is, the organizational ID, and it's EAP business, that's on your card. You fill that out, and then you can start doing things as far as looking at their online resources. If you want to see a provider, that's when you call and talk to somebody. They'll do a telephonic screening. They're going to ask you some questions just to kind of sort out, okay, what kind of provider do we want to send somebody to? If someone's talking about something about they're having difficulty with their adolescent, well, it doesn't make sense if they send you to someone who does pastoral counseling. They're going to send you to somebody who works specifically with adolescents and families. That's what the screening is about. You can download an app. I've not used this, so I really don't know what this is like, but for those of you who are download crazy, download away. Any questions that you have? I have one question for you before we get. Are you just looking quizzical? Yes. She's just looking quizzical. Okay. So I have a question for you. Compared to 35 minutes ago, how much more do you know about an employee assistance program? Most of the time we think it's a place to go get counseling for personal issues, and it is. It's a wonderful value, a resource. It has saved people's lives. No two ways around that. But it offers so much more. So I think if we kind of get this stereotype of our head about what an EAP is, get that out of the way, we can find this is a resource for absolutely everybody, and it's free. Now, this is going to sound strange. I hope you don't use the EAP. Because that means things are going well. If they're not, you've got a free, confidential resource. Use it, use it, use it, use it. Any questions?
As a retired employee, are they offered the benefit?
That's a good question. Barbara? Okay. Okay, active employees. Other questions? Yes.
My daughter's in college. Could she still use, reading this, the online will preparation, she should have a will. Could she do that even though she's not
You
under my
consider
roof?
her as living under your house, under your roof?
Well, I mean, she's on my, my insurance, but
Yeah.
does that count? Okay.
They're under your coverage, that's fine. It would cover if she comes home and lives during the summer, if she's on your taxes. That's fine, it's all covered. And it's not like they're going to, be private investigators and follow your daughter around and find out really where she lives. So is it possible that someone's going to cheat and use the EAP for someone who's not in their house? Probably. Is that a good thing? Definitely. Because if it's impacting an employee, you, if it's impacting your daughter, it's impacting you. Does that impact the workplace? Absolutely. We're all serving the same thing. Other questions? Let me rephrase that. If you don't have any other questions, you're going to have to go back to work. Going once, going twice. You are all gluttons for punishment. Go back to work. Thank you for your time and attention.